privacy. So the first 4 or 5 of these solutions are browser based, and I'm going to use Chrome as an example. Spyware blockers, so these are going to protect us from any spyware that gets downloaded. So spyware certainly can be protected against by antivirus software as well. One of the extensions in your Chrome browser, something like pop-up blockers, ad blockers, all part of the browser, and it helps protect our information as we surf. There's anonymous surfing, and that is incognito. That is where none of the cookie information is stored, and none of the websites that we visited are stored. Cookie managers allows us to track the cookies that are placed on our computer, and also to delete those that we don't want to have on there. Secure email. Now, Gmail is secure. It uses an encryption key, but that private key is actually stored somewhere on the Google servers, which means that there's some kind of a legal issue. Technically, they could be subpoenaed, and that information, your personal emails, might be revealed. There are some email servers, and MIT is working on where they encrypt the message but don't keep the private key. They don't store that, so even if they wanted to, they couldn't give up that information. Anonymous remailers mask your email address by forwarding it through another email address. Disk file erasing programs. This refers to writing over information on a disk, erasing it, and writing back over it up to 7 times to make sure the information is 100% wiped from the hard disk. Policy generators help website develop privacy policies, and you can see there's a non-for-profit OECD. They help organize and develop a policy for a website. Public key encryption is part of SSL, and we talked about that, where you have a private and public key, where the public key encrypts things and the private key decrypts those things, and those are matching sibling keys. In other words, they go together. One puts things into code and the other takes things out of. Here's some other examples of protecting information, in this case intellectual property. 3 main types, and we'll talk about each one of these individually. Copyrights, patent, trademark laws. We'll talk about the differences between the 3. And the goal here is to balance the public interest of being able to consume and use information and products and services, and the right for private individuals and companies to benefit from their inventions. So copyrights are the laws that are designed to protect individuals when they create something. Now, most often this is going to be things that are written, but can include things certainly like music, dance performances, right? Any kind of expression, and that is copyrighted at the time of creation. Now, it can also be registered with the Copyright Office, and that's certainly something that you would consider if you might take legal action if there was a violation. Fair use doctrine is the exceptions to the copyright laws, and that is typically for academic purposes, and it will be judged on things like how much of the original work was used, what's the purpose of copying that original work, is there an effect on the market for the person who created the original work. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act was the first effort to take into account the unique aspects of the internet and how that changes how we use and consume information. Next, let's look at patents. Now, recall that copyrights are the protection of some kind of expression, whether it's written, whether it's music, whether it is a dance. Patents are protecting an idea. So oftentimes software is protected by copyright laws because as soon as you write that code, that's an expression. Now, patents are a little tougher to get because it's not the words that are protected, but the idea. Certainly things like the iPhone design can be patented, but when you try to patent things like software, and there are software patents out there, it's a little more difficult. Some examples of patents in software include the one-click button in Amazon. Netflix had a patent on their return envelope for their DVDs, and this was back when they primarily sent DVDs as rentals, and then you could return them in the envelope. Well, that was patented. Obviously, you can't patent things that aren't unique. This is obviously to protect and encourage inventors to invest their time to create something, knowing that after they do that, someone can't just come in and copy that and enjoy the benefits of their work. So what you do is you patent something, and then you own that idea, and then you can license them out. Another example in software of this is the PageRank algorithm for Google. This is the algorithm that makes the search results we get in Google pretty accurate as we type in our searches and get the returns. Well, that particular technology, PageRank, can be licensed out to an individual company for searching their own intranet. So the patent will create a virtual monopoly on that and raises the barriers to entry. And so that's certainly good for the inventors. Finally, we'll take a look at trademarks, and we'll look at some specific areas where trademarks are affected by the internet. So this is going to be something that identifies a particular product or company. And the purpose here is if you have built up some brand equity, you get to be the only one who can enjoy that benefit. And so we'll take a look at different ways that the internet has allowed infringement upon trademarks. And what we're talking about is dilution. It is the thing that weakens the connection between your product and the brand that you've created. So there was something called cyber squatting. It still takes place, but right when the World Wide Web was starting out and gaining some traction with e-commerce, people would try to register domain names. So let's say there was a time where Oprah didn't have a website and someone registered the domain name Oprah.com, and that was kind of a little bit of a news item, and she sued and won the rights to get her name and her domain name. Cyber piracy is also called typo squatting. It is spelling something a little bit differently than the original name, changing it by a letter or something like that, so it looks like the original company name or website, but it's slightly different. Meta tagging includes putting things in the meta tag that are maybe a trademark. For example, let's say we were selling cookies online, and we put in inside our meta tag, we put in things like Chips Ahoy, Oreos, right? And we're just using those trademark names to get some more relevant hits to our website. Keywording is doing the same thing with meta tagging, but putting it in the body section instead of the head section. Linking and deep linking is a way to connect to a website and really bypass the home page and really using the information on another website and kind of appropriating it through linking from our web page. Framing not used much anymore, but there is a element in HTML where you can actually open another website in your website. It does create some problems with searching and so forth, and so most websites aren't designed that way. Let's take a look at how the internet is governed and the different entities that attempt to regulate portions of the internet. So it's a mixed mode environment. That just means that there are different areas of the internet, and some are governed by governments and others are governed by other entities. One of those entities is ICANN. That stands for the Internet Corporation of Signed Names and Numbers. They handle the domain name system, and that's what we're talking about with cyber squatting. Who gets to be www.depaul.edu. And so you can pay for the rights to have that registered, and the entity that oversees all of the RIRs, the Regional Internet Registries, is ICANN. And this last bullet point is it's not easy to control, but it does go through a central hub of servers, and certainly you can monitor things. I guess an example of that would be some of the censorship that occurs in countries like China and India. Let's take a look at another way to regulate e-commerce, and that's with taxation. So one of the problems with buying something online is where the sale actually takes place. Does it take place on your computer? Does it take place on the server? How do we decide where the sale takes place and what sales tax laws actually apply? And certainly from state to state, from country to country, this is going to be an issue. Moto refers to mail order and telephone order, and that was a problem when you used to buy things through a catalog. Where does the tax actually get assessed? Is it in the state that you bought it from, and so forth? This is true for e-commerce as well. You can see over on the right there, I've got a little screen capture of a summary from Amazon, and you can see they have an estimated tax to be collected, and that just means that there's no one simple rule to decide how much tax should be collected. Some of the factors that were used to figure out where the tax is actually owed would be if there was a physical nexus in the state that you were making the purchase. In other words, if there's a warehouse or a brick and mortar store and you purchased it online, because of the brick and mortar presence, then you would owe the sales tax for that particular state. There was an Internet Tax Freedom Act that was passed to make sure that e-commerce was able to get some traction and get going before the taxes would make it really unattractive to make purchases. Finally, we'll talk about net neutrality, and we're just going to cover the core idea behind net neutrality. Net neutrality has the premise that all bits are equal. All bits, whether they are from a Amazon transaction, whether they're from watching a movie, streaming, that they should be treated equal. In other words, they shouldn't be charged more or less just based on where they were created and where they're going to or from. Netflix and YouTube consume about 50% of the bandwidth in the United States. And prior to February 2015, ISPs, Internet Service Providers, could throttle or control the bandwidth for high volume users. So if you were watching a lot of Netflix, for example, and downloading a lot of videos through streaming, they could throttle or cut back your bandwidth so it would go slower.